Hello, everyone. All right, thanks for a good class last night. Hopefully, you understand the American, the French Revolution, and get an idea about that. Anyway, on to this China. So this was pretty funny. It's not about China, but came out of the Anne Frank house in Holland. It's the Netherlands, and this was in a window of a place. This is a souvenir shop. Kim Jong Il. So it's not the current leader, Kim Jong Un, but it's his father or the son of Kim Il Sung. So kind of funny on a plate for sale. And this was the sign in their window. Yes, sorry, we're open. Funny people. Finally, dog hell. It's great, people. What do dogs do? They poop everywhere and they chase mailmen. So what do they do in hell? They pick up the poop and deliver the mail. That's funny. All right, the East Asian world. What do we know about Asia? Well, I've talked quite a bit about this in class, so we will be able to go through this a little quicker. But if I haven't made this clear, because I haven't had a board to draw on or a map up. But take a look at this, people. Asia, as I've said over and over, Jesus Christo is born on the continent in Asia. All these religions, Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, all of these, Zoroastrianism, all of them come out of the Asian continent. All of them. See it over there? Turkey is cut off a little bit, but you can see it. Syria, Saudi Arabia, it's all on the Asian continent. Now, it doesn't mean the people that live there are Asians. In the western part, I'm pointing out on my map, what we call the Middle East, as you can see, is not middle of the East at all. It's actually the west of Asia. It's completely wrong. Those are Arabs that live there. Up in the top part, Russia, those are Slavs, okay? But what is kind of cool, if I was more advanced in my technology, I could draw a line. See where it says Russia? Go over to the right of the red and draw basically a diagonal line from the right of the box, the top, down to the left of the box, including India and Pakistan, kind of about there if you can see that. Cutting off Saudi Arabia, a diagonal line. The funny part about this is Asia is the largest continent in the world, and half of the world's population lives below that line you just did. So basically half of China, India, all of Southeast Asia, Japan, all of that is the most populated place on the face of the earth. On the other hand, above it is the least populated place on the face of the earth. So this idea that America is the center of the universe and all this, it is right now, sure, of course, we're on top. But historically, this has been the top continent, the largest continent in the world, where most things, inventions, philosophies, everything has come from, for the most part. And there it is on a grand scale if you look at it, how large it is. Okay, Asia. All right, so one thing you'll find out right away is the Chinese have dynasties. This is the Qing that you see here. It will switch from the Ming. There's the Han. There's the Sui. There's the Tang. There's Zhao. There's 29 or 30 of them or so. And what we're going to look at for this real quick is what you'll find out is there's not much different in the way they set up their empires and rule than how Europeans did. It's about the same thing. They have a thing, the mandate from heaven. We compare that to absolutism. We compare it to the Sultan in the Middle East, these Muslim empires we call it. They're based on absolute power for the most part. The rulers are supposed to rule correctly on these Confucian teachings, but they don't always. And then many times they're overthrown. And we can very much see the same thing with Europe and the other empires. So the point we're trying to make is the world at this time and the areas we're looking at have a lot of similarities, okay? And what's fascinating is to take a look at the civil service exam. It's founded by the Hans opposing the 300s, but it's really put to use by the Tang in the 600s. And this is amazing, people. So what we're talking about here, what we need to focus on is social mobility. What does that mean? It means we mobily social, right? We socially mobilize. No, what it means is moving through class in society. And the question is, does America have a pretty easy way to move through class systems? Are we mobily social? Do we have social mobility? And in a short lecture online that I hope you're listening to, I'm going to have to say yes. And most of you should be nodding your head. Now, we have all kinds of blocks, and we know that. Whether you might be poor, race is an issue, as we talked last night with students, gender. We've had all these blocks that can stop people, but for the most part, we're all pretty confident that if you work hard, you're going to hit some hurdles, and maybe even just outright discrimination or things, but for the most part, you're going to be able to move to the next class if you really work hard. And what I'm about to tell you is, historically, throughout the world, that's been unheard of. That is another thing to tie into that question last night of what makes America great. It is one of the main things. Now, other places around the world, there is social mobility and all this, but a lot of times it depends on whether you come from money or what your last name is. In America, for the most part, generally speaking, we've stayed away from that, which is awesome. But here, what this is showing you is in the 600s, just everyone knows that 600 post-baby Jesus, America's not even heard of as we know it. The Chinese have a system called the civil service exam that people come, they take an exam. If you pass, you can get a job in this huge empirical government the Chinese have. And it's a way to move your family and move up in class. This is unheard of in the rest of the world. What is Europe doing from the 600s to the 1400s that I've been harping about? They're in the mired in the Dark Ages, right? Feudalism. They're working on a little plot of land, digging through mud, trying to stay alive. I mean, China is so far ahead, so glorious at this time. And it's a really good system. We, as I said, hey, everybody copies us. We invent a civil service stamp, which we still have today. We invented it in 1883. It's because a guy, Charles Goodyear, shoots the president, James Garfield. I hope that's right, but no one's going to check it. Okay? It's him and the guy who shoots McKinley. I always get mixed up. Yeah, it doesn't matter at all. And the point is, he was a job seeker, and we decided, hey, we better stop appointing people on who they know and maybe base this off something in the past of people who have experience. Okay? What the problem with it is, though, in a time when the rest of the world is mired in the Dark Ages and no one cares and your world is isolated, this is a great system. However, it becomes a terrible system when the Western world, as we already learned about last night, uses all the devices and inventions that, you've been a part of the Chinese for the most part inventing and creating, and then use them to sail around and conquer the world. As the Europeans show up and they say, hey, we want this, we want that, the Chinese stick to this age-old, 1,000-year-old process of Confucian classics and things that really are not based, as it says in the slide here, on science and technology. So, boom, right now your mind should be clicking. Why is China what it is today? Why is it stuck in this Dark Ages, basically? The real answer is the Communist Revolution, but even before that, when the West is trying to get in the 15, 16, 17, 1800s, is because they refuse to modernize. They refuse to accept modern ideas. Even though they've invented most of these modern ideas or used them first or had a huge stake in them, they've come to a point where they've said, we're not moving that anywhere any further. Okay, so fascinating idea to think about on that historical timeline of where countries are at certain times. All right, the first to arrive, you should know, are the Portuguese. And they want two things. Oop, did you hear that? See, that'd be an exam question. I should have like a little bell, bing, or something like that. Two things. They want trade, and they want Christian religion proselytizing. They want trade and religion. That's the answer. They want to bring both. Funny part is here, I'm going to keep this short if you read the chapter, but the Chinese are unbelievably resistant to trade even with them. So again, we think about this today with China. What do they do today? They make cheap goods for the world. Why is that? Now, unfortunately, many Americans, well, it's because they can't do anything. They're Chinese, and that is absurd. They've been some of the greatest societies in the world. They make that today because we want them to make that today. And at this point, it's the other way around. And just so you know, that doesn't start happening until about the 1990s, that all this stuff is sent offshore to China to be made. So it's a very new thing in our history. Hard to even talk about it. It's not even history. It's happening. But back here, the Dutch, the British, everyone, the Portuguese arrive, and the Chinese want little contact with them, and the Chinese have the best goods. Porcelain, silk, all of these fine things, and the Europeans are dying to get their hands on them, but they're barred from the cities. And it's a real strange system called the Canton system, the Canton system, that is very, very restrictive of how you can trade with China. So they don't want the contact with them. The Jesuits, are the first missionaries to arrive. The Jesuit missionaries show up. And here's what happens in these slides here. I'll leave it on here for a bit, and then I'm going to click. When these Catholic missionaries show up, they're used to dealing with societies that they have met that have no structure, let alone Christianity they don't know, but no structure in their society, and they're forced to start from the bottom and work their way up. And this is very difficult to do. In any religion, Okay, so this is now we're under the proselytizing part. This is how they want to get Christianity into China. Okay, and what they find out is when they get there is that the Chinese have a unbelievably advanced system of society already set up, a pyramidal style with the rulers on top, the nobles and priests below, and the rest down below that. And they have no problem interjecting into this Christianity, and they basically say, Well, the problem is you've just got the wrong God. Confucian, Buddhist that you've been introduced to, all these things are just the wrong one. Here's the real one. And if you study Chinese history from years back, you'll find out that's the way their cycles have worked. When these dynasties come and go, a new ruler shows up. He has a new or an old religion. That's funny, but that he brings back and introduces, and the people go for it again. So this was just another step in their society. It's not that unusual, and they accept it. There's a bit about ancestor worship, which some people may or may not know, but it's a practice the Chinese have. Not much different than purgatory for the Catholics, that say you can still talk to your ancestors, you can pray for them, you can bring things to them, and their spirits won't haunt you. And in case they're not where they should be in their death, of the other world, you can guide them to the right area. So the Franciscans, the Jesuits are totally fine with this, and they say this is just a cultural thing. But the Franciscans and the Dominicans, who are two different sects, sects, of Catholic missionaries, come around, and they are appalled about this. And they can't believe it and say that you have created a pagan, semi-pagan Christians. And what do? They report back to the Pope. And here's this thing I've been harping on. I'm thinking of Gunny right now, as every time I ask this question, he looks at me. Gunny looks up. Is the Pope an important person? And we've already determined. At times, yeah, at times, no. But here, listen. They're in China. The Pope is in Rome. And when the Franciscans and Dominicans report to him, the Pope says, I agree with you, not the Jesuits, and you must ban all ancestor worship in that new area called China. So again, I hope you can see this. This is a cultural thing. It really can. I'm not going to go into examples, but there's plenty of things that different cultures do with religion, that some are just culture. It doesn't mean they're not religious. And the point is the Pope an important person in the 1700s, 1600s? You better believe it. He's banning a certain practice that a culture's been doing for thousands of years in the name of his religion. Well, the Chinese are going to show the Pope what they think of that, and they throw out all Christian missionaries. They're called a heretical sect, Christianity, and all churches and missionaries are closed. And how we connect this today to really wrap this up is, how is Christianity in China today? How is it under the Communist Revolution, and how has it been? And the answer is, of course, terrible. And the question then remains is, do you think the fact that China doesn't accept Christianity today has to do with the actions of the 16 and 1700s? And the answer is, bing, Ned Ryerson. That's from Groundhog Day for whoever's watching this. Yes, it absolutely has to do with it. Still waters run deep. Okay? China, look at this. 70 to 80 million people in 1400. 300 million people at the end of the 18th century. So they have a massive population. Today they have 1.3 billion people, largest on the face of the earth. So they've always had this population crisis. 3 to 4 generations, you can see this arranged marriages, sons are valued over daughter, male-dominated society. Okay? And the big thing about them is, right in the middle there, labor-intensive rice fields. 70% of Chinese people today still work in agriculture. That's phenomenal. It's another reason China is not an industrialized country today. It is not, because 70% of their people still work in agriculture. The United States is under 10%. Okay, we use machinery, so you got to keep that in mind. In a very, very male-dominated society. A cop once pulled Chuck Norris over. The cop was lucky to leave with a warning. Now, Tokugawa, Japan. I'm going to deal with this right here, and I'm going to be done with it. Okay, ready? Guess what happens in Japan? You got it. Buddhism's in discredit. Let's try that again. Discredit. Oh, I guess I cut off the other slides. Okay, so I'll leave it there. The point is, it's like a big repeat. Okay? Pete and repeat went up the hill. Pete came down. Who's left? Repeat, right? And everything, the same thing happens. The Japanese open, they're accepting, they let them in. They say, you must, then the Christians say, you got to tear down all these temples and only have Christianity. And the Japanese go crazy. You've seen The Last Samurai, it's part of that. And they throw them out of their country. Christians are never allowed back in. And the more important about Japan, listen to this. If you are listening to the lecture, it's going to help you. Japan banishes all foreigners from Japan at this point in the 1500s. And no one who's not Japanese will ever enter Japan again and live to tell about it until the 1840s, when the United States comes knocking on the door and says, I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your island over if you don't let us into trade. And it's a very, very pivotal moment in Japanese history. So this is Japan's launching into an isolationist. Okay, so the exact same thing happens in Japan. They're open at first, then too many rules, and they throw the Christians out. All right, I hope this helps for the lecture, and I look forward to seeing you guys next week. Bye-bye.